I'm Susan Yockey with VOA's Middle East Monitor. Coming up, rescue efforts continue after a massive earthquake in Turkey. Libya celebrates its liberation. Has Iran's nuclear program hit a snag?
Sanctions against the nuclear program can really significantly delay Iran's progress. You can't stop it from building a bomb or making a decision.
And an Arab hip-hop artist is inspired by contemporary events. It's all ahead on The Voice of America. Search efforts are continuing in southeastern Turkey for survivors of Sunday's powerful 7.2 magnitude earthquake. The number of dead reported has exceeded 200, and the death toll is expected to continue to rise. Dorian Jones reports from Istanbul, Turkey.
Rescue workers are racing against time to find the hundreds of people believed to be trapped under the rubble of buildings that fell after the quake. Authorities say the 7.2 magnitude quake collapsed or severely damaged thousands of buildings. Despite battling against the numerous aftershocks, rescue efforts have so far been successful. A woman is dug out of her collapsed apartment block after being trapped for 10 hours. She calls out for her mother, who was injured. The survivors are from the town of Erciş, one of the worst-hit areas where as many as 100 buildings were reported collapsed. Turkish Prime Minister Recep Tayyip Erdogan visited Van, the main city in the quake-stricken region, late Sunday. He warned that there may be still worse news to come.
Tabii en önemli sıkıntımız ağırlıklı olarak köylerde.
He says the biggest concern is for the villages because the buildings are made of clay and mud and are far more vulnerable to quakes. He says almost all the buildings in such villages are destroyed. With the telephone system failing in many places, there's been little news from the area. Many of the roads have also been cut, adding to the difficulties of rescue efforts. The remote and mountainous southeastern region of Turkey, where the quake struck, is one of the poorest parts of the country. Weather conditions worsened late Sunday, with freezing temperatures and forecasts for snow. Turkey has received offers of help from numerous countries, including the United States, Greece and Israel. But Mr. Erdogan told reporters he has declined most offers of help. Turkey is particularly vulnerable to earthquakes because it sits on major geological fault lines. In 1999, 2 earthquakes, registering more than 7 points on the Richter scale, killed almost 20,000 people in densely populated parts of the northwest of the country. Dorian Jones of VOA News, Istanbul, Turkey.
Libya is now liberated, and people are celebrating in the capital, Tripoli. Correspondent Al Pessin is in Tripoli, and VOA's Paul Westphaling asked him if there is a firm indication of where the country goes from here.
There was a lot of excitement when Tripoli was liberated, when Sirte was liberated, when Gaddafi died, and then finally the big ceremony on Sunday. But now it's the morning after, and people are not sure what the way forward will be. Everybody's very hopeful. Everybody I've spoken to is very happy to be rid of the old regime and to have the kind of freedoms that they've always wanted. But exactly what will happen is really a question. Mr. Jalil, in his speech on Sunday, said that there will be more Sharia law, more Islamic law here in Libya. And I've been speaking to people about that, and people seem actually quite happy about that.
Now, that's something that Western countries had been a little concerned about. Sharia law is not particularly welcoming to Western traditions. Does this seem to bother anybody there?
Well, no, and it's an interesting cultural difference, Paul, because as you say, in the West, Sharia law to many people represents lack of rights and repression of women and a lot of the old ways, not modern ways. But people I've spoken to this morning, and I mean, this is not a comprehensive survey, but I've spoken to a pretty good cross-section of people. And in their minds, Sharia law is part of their religion, it's part of their culture, and they welcome it. Even some of the things that Westerners find particularly difficult to understand, things like allowing men to have more than one wife. People here say, well, in certain circumstances, that's an appropriate thing to do. And I've been actually, to be honest, quite surprised to hear people say that. Young women, older women, married women, and several men say yes, they should have the right, but at least for people in the city, they say this will not be something that happens very often.
Has there been anything said about elections coming up? That was something that had been mentioned as, look, as soon as all of this is done, we're going to have elections, we're going to have some kind of a democracy in Libya. Any idea when, where, or if?
Well, the question of if, so far, the answer is yes, as you say. It's been promised, but there hasn't been anything about exactly when. Keep in mind that this war, this 8-month war, just ended officially on Sunday. The National Transitional Council needs to move its headquarters officially to Tripoli and begin the process of organizing elections, writing a new constitution, etc. So it's not a quick process. For the moment, it seems to me the Libyan people, in the enthusiasm of having succeeded in this effort, they're feeling quite patient at the moment. This will not last forever, of course, but I think everybody understands this will take some time, and they are hopeful at this stage that the democracy that has been promised will in fact be delivered.
When you look into the eyes of people walking around the streets, what do you see? What do you see in the expressions on their faces?
Well, I would say two things. First of all, it is, just another day in Libya, in a sort of a Middle Eastern country. People are going about their daily lives, going to school and working and doing normal things. But as soon as you ask them, how do you feel about the end of the revolution? That's when you see the smile. That's when you see the enthusiasm. People are very hopeful about the future and feel a real sense of pride that this country accomplished what it did, getting rid of a dictator of 42 years.
VOA correspondent Al Pessin speaking with us from Tripoli, Libya. Bassem Fathi was in the thick of things during the revolt in Egypt that pushed Hosni Mubarak from power. Now the activist is winner of a human rights award. The nonprofit organization Human Rights First is issuing him its annual award for his work to bring political freedom to Egypt and create a democracy. We asked about his role in the Arab Spring of Egypt.
The whole uprising, it was leaderless, but there was a group of people who were working for democracy and for getting to this day few years ago, and I was one of those. I worked with many youth initiatives working on democracy, mobilizing the people and recruiting young people for doing something dramatic for changing the stagnant situation in Egypt. And on the revolution itself, or on the days of the uprising, in the start I was responsible for doing some logistic work, for getting tents or blankets for those who are going to sit in, getting a kind of shields or whatever things needed for facing the security if they attacked us using gases or whatever. This was just in the beginning. Then only one day later it became too big to be organized. Then I just converted to be one of those who are in the square. I was playing another role on the rest of the days, trying to connect with the political forces, with the public figures, and trying to make a kind of unified position in order to get out from this problem, and trying to see what we should do for getting Mubarak out.
Can you tell us about any definitive moments of the Egyptian revolt that you can recall? Was there any particular moment that stands out in your mind?
On Friday, 28th of January, this was a very distinctive moment. I mean, it was the first time that we're facing the security while using bullets and tear gases, using their vehicles for crashing the people. Of course, we faced the Central Security Forces a lot before. I mean, they were just using the sticks for, again, the demonstrations that were like less than 200. But later, when we became millions in the street, now we felt that we're just facing an occupying military, not Central Security Forces of our country. So this was very distinctive, while seeing all the fellows and the friends and even the people you don't know around me while just falling by the bullets.
Were you very frightened?
This was very strange. Supposedly that when you're seeing somebody killed beside of you, you're going to be scared and go away. But exactly the opposite happened. When we witness somebody killed or something, we're going forward more and more.
You became defiant.
The hope was raising.
Tuesday, we'll hear more from Bassem Fathi, winner of Human Rights First Human Rights Award. For more on the Arab Spring uprisings, visit our website at voanews.com/ME. The Obama administration is defending the announced total withdrawal of U.S. troops from Iraq by the end of the year, amid strong criticism from the president's domestic political opponents. VOA's Michael Bowman reports from Washington.
More than 8 years after the U.S.-led invasion of Iraq, the last American forces will soon be departing. Secretary of State Hillary Clinton says the pullout is consistent with commitments made by President Barack Obama and his predecessor who ordered the invasion, George W. Bush.
President Obama said that combat troops would leave Iraq by the end of this year, but before he ever said that, the Bush administration also committed to withdrawing all troops by the end of this year. So you have a bipartisan commitment, and that was viewed as appropriate.
Clinton spoke on the U.S. television program Fox News Sunday. She stressed the United States has no intention of abandoning Iraq.
What we've agreed to is a support and training mission similar to what we have in countries from Jordan to Colombia, and we will be working with the Iraqis. We will also have a very robust diplomatic presence.
But that is not good enough, according to President Obama's Republican critics. Senator Lindsey Graham of South Carolina also appeared on Fox News Sunday.
Not being able to close the deal in Iraq is a very serious mistake. Celebrating leaving with no troops behind is a serious mistake.
Graham accused the president of placing political considerations ahead of America's long-term security objectives. He disputed any suggestion that Iraq is ready to stand on its own, particularly with regard to its neighbor, Iran.
The Iraqis have no air force. They have no intelligence gathering capability. They need counterterrorism assistance. There are missions that we can do, only we can do. The military commander said we needed 15 to 18,000. We have none. It was his job, the Obama administration's job, to end this well. They failed.
Secretary of State Clinton said the United States will retain a robust military presence in the Middle East even after the last troops leave Iraq. She said no nation, including Iran, should doubt America's resolve to support Iraq's democracy. In the end, she said, it was Iraq's decision to insist on a complete U.S. troop withdrawal.
The point of our involvement in Iraq was to create the opportunity for the Iraqis to have their own future without the oppression of a dictator like Saddam Hussein. Now, you can't, on the one hand, say you're all for democracy and sovereignty and independence, and on the other hand, say that when a choice is made that is validated by the current government in Iraq, that somehow is not appropriate, because that is what we were there for, to give the Iraqi people the chance to make their own decisions.
Last week, President Obama said he was keeping a promise to end the war in Iraq, but added the United States will continue to have an interest in an Iraq that is stable, secure, and self-reliant. Michael Bowman, VOA News, Washington.
New reports by Western nuclear experts say Iran's nuclear program is faltering because of poorly functioning equipment. The experts add, however, that Iran has the capability to build at least one nuclear bomb in about 6 months' time, should it choose to do so. But as VOA senior correspondent Gary Thomas reports, it is still believed that Iran's leadership has not yet decided to take that final, irrevocable step.
According to new studies, the centrifuges Iran uses to produce enriched uranium are performing poorly. The Non-Governmental Institute for Science and International Security says many of the machines at the enrichment facility at Natanz are old and breaking down repeatedly. ISIS President David Albright, the lead author of the studies, says the mechanical problems show international sanctions and covert attacks, such as the Stuxnet computer virus, have effectively delayed Iran's nuclear progress.
The central takeaway is that sanctions against the nuclear program can really significantly delay Iran's progress. I mean, it can't stop it from building a bomb or making a decision, but it can slow it down. It can create inhibitions against moving in that direction. And it can just generally make it difficult for Iran to get the raw materials it needs to build large numbers of centrifuges.
Centrifuges are used to purify or enrich uranium. Low-enriched uranium is sufficient for nuclear power plants, but must be highly enriched for nuclear weapons. Albright's report says many of the centrifuges are of an older and less reliable design provided by the Pakistani nuclear trader A.Q. Khan. Albright says that many of the machines were also damaged or destroyed by the Stuxnet computer virus that infected the nuclear program. Iran has been trying to install better centrifuges, but is hampered by international sanctions. Iran denies it has any ambitions to obtain nuclear weapons and insists it only seeks peaceful uses of nuclear power. Nevertheless, Albright says, Iran still has enough working centrifuges to turn out sufficiently pure uranium to build a nuclear bomb, should it decide to do so. U.S. intelligence estimates have said Iran may have a technical capability to produce a nuclear bomb, although not a system to deliver one, but Tehran has not yet decided to cross that line. David Albright says the U.S. and its allies agree that is still the case, although there is some difference over the progress of Iran's nuclear weapons research.
They all agree that no decision has been made by Iran to build weapons, that there is ambivalence about the situation, because I think the Iranian regime knows full well that if it can't get the bomb quickly and have a plan to get more than one, that it could suffer horrible consequences that threaten the existence of the regime.
Ali Hanonen, former deputy director of the UN watchdog agency, the International Atomic Energy Agency, says there is increased concern Iran has been stockpiling low-grade enriched uranium with an eye to turning it into weapons-grade uranium.
With the time, there will be enough material for nuclear bombs if Iran does the decision. And I would say that by end of next year, there starts to be a sizable amount of low-enriched uranium, which I think is a matter of concern quite a few parties.
But Hanonen agrees there is no clear signal that Iran has decided to cross the nuclear red line.
Well, I don't think that anyone has seen real evidence that Iran has done a firm decision to build a nuclear weapon. On the other hand, when such a decision is done, it may not be a big group of people who decide on that, and it may be very difficult to find it out until it's perhaps too late.
The IAEA is scheduled to give its new quarterly inspection report on Iran next month. Gary Thomas, VOA News, Washington.
And up next is our weekly poll feature. Joining me is our Middle East online editor, Yuri Hiltaichuk, to sum up the topic and the results. What do you have for us?
Yes, hi Susan. Last week when we posted our poll, the exchange of Israeli soldier Gilad Shalit for more than 1,000 Palestinian prisoners was very much still in the news. And our goal was to find out what people thought about the swap, especially if you take into consideration that some of the prisoners were serving time for being complicit in serious crimes, including suicide bombings. So, based on the responses we received, we can immediately isolate one group, 29% of voters, who said that they were against the exchange. Now, the remainder of voters were all in support of the exchange, but they subdivided themselves into groups. 24% supported the swap unconditionally. 27%, even though they too supported the swap, thought that it would encourage more kidnappings of Israeli soldiers. And 17%, while also supportive of the exchange, were concerned above all that it would not have any positive impact on Israeli-Palestinian relations. And these numbers are based on over 900 votes that we received, and as always, I need to stress that this is not a scientific poll.
So what are we going to be asking this coming week?
Well, the death of the former Libyan leader Muammar Gaddafi, especially the circumstances surrounding it, are still drawing a lot of attention. So in our next poll, we would like to know what people think about how he died, and whether it's important to actually establish the circumstances under which he did. And anybody can weigh in by casting their vote on our site, voanews.com/me. Again, that's voanews.com/me. And we'll meet here again in a week with the results.
Well, thank you very much, Yuri.
My pleasure, Susan.
That's VOA Middle East online editor Yuri Hiltaichuk here in the studios. A Moroccan woman who only discovered her talent as a hip-hop performer when she came to study in London is now at the forefront of this musical genre. Master Mims delivered her own commentary on the Arab Spring with her song, Back Down Mubarak. Andy Edwards reports on a performance by her in London.
Leighton House in West London is an unlikely setting for the cutting-edge sounds of hip-hop, but its former owner, the 19th century Orientalist Frederick Leighton, might well have approved.
Are you ready?
Miriam Bouchentouf, otherwise known as Master Mims, performed as part of the Noor Festival, sponsored by the local borough to present the broad range of Middle East culture. Until she came to London 2 years ago, Miriam never thought of switching from fan to performer.
I got into hip-hop because I've always been a big fan of the music genre, and I always felt it was this generation's sort of rock music.
Events in Cairo's Tahrir Square in late January helped set a train of protest in motion throughout much of the Middle East. Arab hip-hop has long commented on injustice,
back down, Mubarak, back down.
And the musicologist Randa Safie says Miriam is helping to further more than one revolutionary cause.
Well, Miriam is part of the new generation of hip-hop artists, and female hip-hop artists are still a minority. But I think artists like Miriam are setting a precedent for future female participation in hip-hop, which is definitely a positive development to the genre.
Miriam's best-known number, Back Down Mubarak, was inspired not only by watching contemporary events in Egypt, it stemmed from a lifelong affinity for Egyptian culture.
Growing up in Morocco, we had a lot of access to Egyptian culture, whether it was movies, film, music, art, and I guess in a way I always felt like that closeness. And I think the whole Arab world can attest to that.
Much of Miriam's material is personal. She has plenty to say about being a woman in Arab society. In the driving rhythms of hip-hop, musicologist Randa Safie believes youth in the Middle East are also following a long-established tradition.
Part of the reason that young Arabs are attracted to hip-hop is because in Arab culture, poetry is very highly revered in the spoken word. And there are a lot of parallels between that and Arab hip-hop.
Hip-hop as a musical form has been going for 30 years. As an Arab woman, Miriam Bouchentouf, Master Mims, is providing fresh perspective in a time of turbulence. This is Andy Edwards for VOA News, London.
This has been VOA's Middle East Monitor. Join us Monday through Friday for news from the region and of interest to the region. Coming up on International Edition, the U.S. and North Korea sit down for intense talks over its nuclear program. Thanks for tuning in to the Voice of America.
For more on the stories you've heard on our radio programs, visit our website at voanews.com. That's where you'll find in-depth reports, related stories, videos, and more from our team of correspondents. Or take the news with you by downloading podcasts of your favorite VOA program. That's at voanews.com.
voanews.com.
Online news for a changing world.